Hey, one important thing. Can I get a fly safe? Fly safe. Yeah, okay. That'll be going on the internet. Oh, I don't have the controller. They never gave me the controller. Someone will run up in a second. But yes, hi, hello. I'm Scott Manley. I'm supposed to be giving a presentation, and I can't advance the slides because logistical problems. And as we are EVE players, we know that logistics is what wins wars, right? Yes, God bless GSOL. So yes, for those of you who don't know me, well, today we're going to talk about how EVE Online made me an internet rocket scientist. And I'm a rocket scientist in the same way that you are flying, spaceships, as in internet spaceships, right? So hello. For those of you who don't know me, well, this is my YouTube page, right? Scott Manley. Here's a bunch of videos. Here's me talking about scientists demanding to probe Uranus. I cover a lot of space and a lot of science, but I've had a long history in gaming. And if you look at the banner at the top, you can see some cues as to my background. Right on the very left-hand side, you can see a turntable. I was a DJ, some equations. As you go over, there's some code. And on the right here, there's a rifter. Yes, very recognizable profile. And also, if you're an EVE player, you might recognize the backdrop is, of course, a Caldari Nebula. So EVE was kind of instrumental in bringing my channel up to the world. And I want to take a look at my most popular videos. So these are the videos on my channel sorted based upon the number of views. And you can see up the top, it's all like disasters. Everybody loves explosions. I mean, Chernobyl exploding, a lot of physics there, volcano exploding, telescope collapsing. Yeah, okay, but go further down, there's some Kerbal, and I'll say that, I found Kerbal because of EVE. Down in the bottom, though, you see I have some EVE stuff, right? The beginner's guide, the 10 things that you need to know to begin playing EVE Online. And on the bottom right, the Fountain War, the true story, a story for non-EVE players, to be honest. So, yeah, my channel, it's sort of half of my business, let's say. I get a day job, but I still do a lot of this. I have thousands of videos on there. At last count, 480 million video views, 1.4 million regular subscribers. And yeah, I do everything from why rockets fall apart, or how Yuri Gagarin's flight or ride became, a Soviet space ball. But to understand how I got to that, I'm going to rewind back to the old days, back to 1977 when I was 4 or 5 years old and I saw Star Wars, and it had a fundamental, founding impression on me, right? I want to fly spaceships. And we're a 4-year-old kid in Scotland, flying spaceships. Yes, that's exactly what I want to do. Yeah. I still want to fly spaceships, but I've sort of become more realist. This is my Halloween costume from a couple of years ago. That chest plate is like a food container with some cardboard stuck on it. The helmet's really good, and I hand-sewed that vest. Turns out, by the way, I live in the same town as George Lucas, which is really bizarrely coincidental. But yeah, I can't fly spaceships for real. I am, however, flying planes for real. I'm learning this right now. And strange EVE-Link, when I do a lot of listening to air traffic control to learn how to listen to pilots, and I'll just put that on in the background. But I'll also put on the EVE Online soundtrack because it's nice and chill and it doesn't get in the way, and I'm just continually now learning what pilot speak is. But yeah, for flying spaceships, video games was everything, right? I was Elite. Boy, I spent so much time in that, and Elite is obviously a very core influence on what EVE Online is, right? It had the idea of the universe where you could do different things. You could choose to go out and shoot ships, or you could, in theory, be an asteroid miner, but I don't know anybody that really did that. And at the other end, as time went on, the technology got better. There's like an X-Wing game. I spent a lot of time playing those. But for the space side of things, the real space, I didn't need to give that up because I went to university. I studied astronomy. I couldn't be an astronaut in Scotland, but I could be an astronomer. I got a degree in astronomy and physics. I then decided that I was terrified of real life, and I got another degree in computational physics. And then I went to Ireland to study more asteroid stuff, like this is Armagh Observatory in Northern Ireland. I spent 5 years desperately trying to not get a real job and not getting a PhD out of it. But, I did publish the odd paper. I ended up turning out that I was much better at writing software than I was doing astronomical research. And that sort of led me into the next step, where Silicon Valley came. They paid me very well. I moved to California. I partied a lot more, played a lot less games. I did meet my wife because I was a DJ. That worked very well. Once I got the family, however, you kind of had to give up the DJ career. This is me with my daughter. She was about 3 months old there. And you'll see a bit more of her later. So because I wasn't going to parties, I had time to start playing spaceship games again. 2008, EVE Online, Empyrean Age. I think I'd heard about EVE Online many times. I'd met a guy, actually, who ended up working for CCP Games later. He was a DJ in San Francisco, just coincidentally. But I joined with my current account in 2008. That was the Empyrean Age release, and they had a TV campaign that played some commercials during Battlestar Galactica, and that was it. It's like, right, I'm going to do this for real. I'm going to learn how this game works. And boy, did I love this game, right? There was so much to do, right? The thing about EVE is that it is full of many small and simple systems that interact, right? And they interact in not necessarily obvious ways. But yeah, you can just spend your time running missions. You can become a PvPer if that's your thing. If you want to just grief people, CCP will let you do this. Or you can just be one of those people that shifts stuff around, does the logistics, builds the stuff. But on top of that, there is a dedicated community that really kept me here, right? Once I found all these systems and found that there were people working in all of these, that definitely contributed to sticking, holding me there. It had the lore, and of course it had the emergent stories. And you wanted to be part of those. I wanted to be part of those emergent stories. The things that were sort of created by the players, involving the players. Something that the creators didn't really envisage. So yeah, games let you be whoever you want, except that I actually made a character that's pretty much me. Right? I don't know how many of you remember the old game engine, the old character generator. On the far right, you can see my current version, and obviously you can tell I played the Doctor Who thing, so I still do log into EVE, right? Also, sometimes the game has its own ideas of who I am. This was me in the recent Triglavian, what do you call it? In the lore around that, I made a whole contribution as Manuel Scotti, astrophysicist. It was quite an entertaining time. That was when, of course, HiSec changed in a radical manner. So 2008, what did I do? Well, I was in asteroids, research, so I actually spent a lot of time mining asteroids. Not necessarily because I wanted to be an asteroid miner, but actually the way my life worked was I had a lot of free time where I was doing other things, but I could click on some buttons every few minutes. So I was like, okay, let's make money. Now I can play. Let's go and burn all that money in low-sec or something like that. So yeah, my version of EVE was not like anyone else. I was just sort of mucking around and doing a lot of things. So I'm an EVE player. How do I get started on YouTube? How does EVE figure into this? Well, my YouTube channel started when I bought an iPhone, or rather my wife bought me an iPhone. She insisted I needed to come up, to something more modern. And the first one I got was an iPhone 3GS, and it was the first one that let you do video recording, and more importantly, you could hit a button in there and upload whatever you had recorded to YouTube to be seen by half a dozen people if you were lucky, right? Of course I did this, right? I was a proud father. First videos I posted was Sky climbing the tree in the park. And then I followed that up with looking at the park mural and Sky being a fairy, Sky in the box. Sky's my daughter, if you haven't heard. Orion in the box, she has a brother. Yeah, Sky playing basketball. And right down the bottom, 4-year-old Sky playing EVE Online. Yeah, this got dark suddenly, didn't it? Right? And I have, this is the justification for it. I was in those communities, and everyone was always complaining about how difficult EVE was for new players. And I'm going to say, sure, there is this chart, but I can confirm that EVE isn't rocket science. If it was, I would be better at it. Right? But yeah, I actually found the original copy of this video and remastered it into like 1080p awesomeness. So for those of you that didn't hear it, this is what it sounds like.
There.
So she's flying to high sec.
Now we get 4 gates to go.
4 gates? That's only this many.
Yeah, that's right. There.
Yeah, she's flying a buzzard.
And you didn't even have to tell me.
No, I didn't have to tell you.
I didn't have to tell you.
I'll have to tell you, the only thing is the next star system has 4 space stations, and you have to dock at the right space station.
I need to tell you something.
What?
Venus is the brightest planet.
Venus is the brightest
planet.
planet.
It is.
Yeah, okay, so you get the idea. And that suddenly actually got like a few thousand views. People were like sharing it. It's like, oh yeah, you and your Titan can't fly, but look, 4-year-old girl playing EVE. How hard can it be? About a year later, actually not even a year later, this is like literally a few weeks later, I was like, let's try and get some more views. So the Dominion trailer came out. It was literally the day after I got laid off from a job. But, so I was like, oh, okay, let's post more videos. And I showed it to my kids. And they love spaceships.
I love spaceships. Me too. Spaceships. 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 Wheel. Ha, let those in spaceships.
What?
Uh-oh. Oh, the spaceship broke. Spaceship!
Yeah. So look, that sort of series continued. We had Sky doing some PvP, defending the ice belts, like literally Hulkageddon, that's right. I had her flying my jump freighter to nullsec. And you know what? My kids have actually grown up to be reasonably well-adjusted kids, despite potential child abuse issues. Although, it wasn't that bad. I didn't make them play World of Warcraft. So I want to step through, like, most popular videos. So most popular video is the Beginner's Guide, which I totally made as a way to get people into the game through my buddy link, so I could get EVE time. I'm not afraid to admit it. I will admit that it was incredibly difficult to do because I broke Windows Movie Maker, the free Movie Maker on it. I had to cut it into multiple parts and reassemble it. But yeah, I made thousands of people joined, and I was so glad that I was actually able to give a lot of those plex to Keelon Darklight, who in turn gave me a spaceship, but he went and gave it to Plex for Good. $40,000, which, yeah, Keelon Darklight actually made the donation, but I got all the news for it. That spacecraft is still sitting in a hangar in LowSec. One day I may bring it out. However, I do notice there's a model out there that's in the silent auction, and it does leave the hangar if you want. It's not going to get destroyed. My favorite video that I made was my history of the Fountain War, and that was in association with a Kickstarter that Matani and friends were running to try and get a fiction book, a military fiction book set in the EVE universe. And they prepared all this like guide, research material, and asked me to make this. And this has been far more successful than the Kickstarter campaign was. But I love it. I love the fact that people come in and they say, damn, I wish I was part of that story. And you can still be part of that story. These stories still happen. The video that most matches my playstyle is this visualization of 2 months of EVE Online. what I did was I was just hitting up the API, hitting all the kill boards, collecting all the data, and trying to like show where things were active. So you can see on the right all the big kills that were happening. You can see this sort of pulse down the bottom, showing the activity levels. I love this, but what this shows is I was very actively analyzing data in Eve. And that's why I sort of knew about Technetium before it really happened. And this is the video that I made, which will probably get me primaried fastest, right?
In a dangerous universe, losing ships is all too easy. We at OTEC understand this. Whenever you suffer life's little mishaps, we'll be there to make sure that your next Hulk can be built from genuine OTEC brand Technetium.
That's right, genuine OTEC brand Technetium. And the video I spent most time making was this 360 video showing all the spacecraft in EVE Online. And this was a technical problem that I wanted to solve. I love doing these VR videos. So the thing about VR videos, if you don't know, they're on YouTube. And you can actually adjust the camera angle. And if you have Google Cardboard or whatever, like you can look around and get the idea of VR. So you can be in the middle of EVE's spaceships watching them blow each other up. You know, I love the idea of these things. There's not always content that's very easy to express in this manner, but EVE Online has some great graphics. So how did I do that? How did I make the EVE client render all this stuff? And I started with EVE Probe, not this one. The EVE Online's graphics test program called EVE Probe, which no longer works right now, but you can set up scenes and have them play. And it will measure the graphics performance, so you can like figure out bugs in the system, whatever. So I was able to set up the same scene multiple times from multiple camera angles. So the same scene ran, and they would all be assembled one after the other, synchronized, and then you could fold these into one giant spherical viewpoint, which would be the video that was what we ultimately saw. So this is what the video looks like. It's stretched. It's called a cylindrical projection, where you're basically vertical as your latitude and horizontal as your longitude. So this is a bunch of miners with stretched lasers and stuff. So now, I want to actually just tell a story. I think that at Fanfest, we often get people telling stories of great things that happened in EVE, things that appeal to the audiences. And PvP, big wars, those are where we really get the meat of these stories. I want to tell a story of my sort of industrial, my greatest industrial moment, right? And that was surrounding the Noctis, right? So my most important skill was data analysis. I wrote all this code, analyzed all this stuff, and when I saw the Noctis salvage ship was going to be introduced with the incursion update, I began looking at how I could make a killing on this, right? I knew that big changes in the market can make big money for people that are prepared and understand things. This was a ship, well, you know it, right? It's a salvage ship, and at that point, mission runners were using, destroyers. This would be better in every single way, and you know what? All the blueprints were being seeded in nullsec. So every mission runner wanted one. The blueprints were incredibly short supply. There was going to be a lot of money to be made, right? So we anticipated this. We stocked up on minerals beforehand. We needed to get the blueprints to high sec, and that was not going to be easy because you started out in Outer Ring and you had to travel through Syndicate. I actually set up like a Tengu with interdiction nullifier and a cloak, and I made insta-warp bookmarks and perches on all the gates. I had a special route plan that avoided the obvious choke points, like if you just did, fastest or safest route, you would go through these systems. I found another way which the data said was going to be clear. And I logged off in the station next day, ready for the update. And sure enough, the next day, everybody's logging in that station, undocking, getting hit on undock. They're getting hit like all the way in the back. Like some of these kills, like this person had, 11 blueprints on them, total value 5 billion ISK. Somebody has, this looks like an unfitted ship. I don't know what's going on there. Anyway, there was rich pickings for pirates, but I made it to high sec, and I had a lot of money there. But, of course, I wanted to make money by making things. So, yeah, started churning out these things. My first Noctis I sold for 360 million ISK. That was fantastic. Almost made back the money that I spent on that blueprint. And I actually wonder, what happened to that? This person bought it, and it probably just went on to mission running. I wish there was some way to track, which was the first of a given ship that was built. There's a gameplay feature we'd like. Keep track of the assembly date. But, of course, the market had such a great demand for this spaceship that the minerals began to run out. And we had anticipated, you can see in this curve here, that when the spacecraft was announced in September, everybody started buying up minerals. And the price of Noxium in particular, which is what the Outer Ring Enterprises ship, or excavations, what they need. So that price went up. And then as soon as they started building them, the price shot up even more. So we needed sources of materials. And one thing I'd done was set up all these buy orders for things like smart bombs, which have lots of Noxium. I could refine it. And by the way, the medium and the large named smart bombs, they have the same materials in them. Back in 2010, most people didn't realize them, so you could pick up the medium size way, way, way cheaper and get a ton of minerals out of them. But even then, that was limited. So I was looking around doing my data analysis, trying to find another source so I could feed this demand in this market. And then an answer came from a divine source, the Pax Amaria, yes. A great, what is it, a miraculous work, a remarkable book published basically about the emperor writing about his hopes and dreams for peace throughout the galaxy. So yeah, it turns out that these were seeded in NPC stations, and you could buy them. Now, the problem was they were only seeded in stacks of 3,000, but if you set up a buy order for the right price for like 1 million of them, you could get 1 million. You just had to pay the fees for buying them. So yeah, once the price gets above 536 or thereabouts, you could start making a profit if you had the refining and everything sorted out. So here I am, industrialist, and I'm literally loading up freighters full of holy books, taking them to my refining station, and yes, I'm going to spread the word of your emperor. I'm going to spread it to the reprocessing plants in my chosen station. And for months, I was burning these books. And thankfully, everybody got their spaceships. And now I really have to ask the Space Pope if I can get forgiveness for No, thank you. So anyway, yes, it was eventually removed from the game in 2012. But it was just fantastic to go through this data analysis and find a way that worked so well for so long. And not many people were doing it in the early days because you could track this, but over time it got known. And now it's a lot less shiny, but still just as holy. I want to skip over now and talk about some real science. So yeah, real-life asteroid mining. This is also an early video I created from my work in astronomy where I wanted to show asteroids being discovered over time. This is all the asteroids orbiting the sun, and the white ones are where they were when they were found. And in the bottom right corner, you can see the time. So over time, more and more asteroids are found. Since Eve has been founded, we've found like 500,000 asteroids in space. It's wild. But for asteroid mining, the nearest thing we've got is asteroid Bennu, which is an asteroid which has been visited by a spacecraft called OSIRIS-REx. This asteroid is about 500 meters across. It's smaller than most battleships in Eve. And this little spacecraft went out to sample the surface. Now, you might think, oh, you just go up and you sort of vacuum the surface off an asteroid with your lasers. Well, no lasers, and a vacuum is very hard in space. Instead, they blow gas down, and the gas circulates around and captures the material. And it worked very well for them. This is what it looks like, the camera on board coming down onto the surface of this chondritic asteroid, very primitive asteroid. This is how they're trying to analyze the early days of the solar system. And when you looked at the sample head, they had lots of material. They had so much, it was like leaking out. Yes, they needed a larger ore hold. That has since been packed up and is headed back to Earth. It's going to land in Utah next year. But now I want to talk about, again, Internet spaceships versus real spaceships. So back in 2003, May 2003, 19 years ago today, EVE Online launched, and it had like about 100 spaceships in it. I don't actually know what that one in the top right is, but that's what the graphics engine looked like back then. It's in the real world, however, there were only 2 spaceships, at least spaceships which carried people. And in fact, one of those wasn't even flying because there had been the Columbia disaster recently. So there was technically only 1 spaceship flying when EVE Online launched. I've got this picture here to show the comparison between the space shuttle and the Soyuz spacecraft there. Yeah, it's kind of wild. This is a comparison between the space shuttle and what a Rifter looks like. You may not think of the Rifter as a big ship, but I assure you it's the size of a 747. So yeah, let's talk about the Soyuz. It's a very, very old spacecraft. It was first flown in 1967. The first flight with a human on board killed the pilot, Vladimir Komarov. It flies with a crew of 2 or 3 typically. It's had hundreds of flights, has no leg room. I mean, you're like, legs right up in your face to fit inside this tiny little space. And I thought it would be interesting to communicate these real-world spaceships to an EVE audience by saying, what is their equivalent in the EVE Online universe? And for the Soyuz, well, it's obviously the Rifter, right? It's a small, low-cost ship. It's a perennial favorite that's used for many things. And actually, it's had quite a few upgrades. You've got the Wolf, the Jaguar. It's utilitarian in its design, and there's no concessions for comfort. Now, at the same time, 2003, yeah, we still have the space shuttle flying. The space shuttle was a magnificent creation that was way too expensive. They built 5 of them. They originally only built 4, but one of them was destroyed and had to be replaced. Yeah, they lost 2 of them to accidents, which killed their crew. Normally, it would fly with a crew of 2 to 7. Flew over about 130 missions, and more people have flown to space on the space shuttle than any other spacecraft. They were magnificent, but they stopped flying 10 years ago. And I would say that in EVE terms, it is a carrier, right? And I think the Thanatos is probably the closest. The thing about carriers is they were very versatile spacecraft for a long time. You could do a lot of different applications. It did carry a lot of stuff, could take it places. But yeah, it was very expensive for a lot of those jobs. You could always do slightly better if you just focused your capabilities. So yeah, since 2003, the world has had more spaceships. Thankfully, there's been a sort of explosion in spacecraft that are available to carry humans into space. And the first one came later in 2003, right? Shenzhou 5. I believe I pronounced that correctly. This is basically China made their own version of the Soyuz with help from Russia. The Shenzhou is a lot larger, thankfully. It has less of the legroom problems. It has a bit more performance. It's flown about 8 times. It's not nearly as prolific as the Soyuz at this time. So I think that logically that makes it a stabber. It's a bit bigger than a Rifter, but again, it's like a fast in-your-face autocannon platform. It still doesn't look comfortable or pretty by any means. 2004. We had Spaceship One winning the X Prize. This was a Burt Rutan special. It is a really cool concept. So the Ansari X Prize was that you had to fly to space, land, and then a week later, or less than a week later, fly to space again. So this was small. It was only designed to go up and straight back down, not into orbit. And they flew this out of Mojave in Southern California. It was dropped from this plane. You see down here where is it? Laser, yes. There's your, I can't see it. That's the White Knight carrier aircraft, and that's the Spaceship One. And I think in EVE terms, this is a Zephyr, right? Which you may remember. You might have one of these in your hangar. It was a free ship that was given out. It uses solar sails to move around, and you can probe stuff in wormholes, and the sleepers won't aggress you. It's cool, but generally useless. And, well, we leave it in the hangar after a couple of flights. 2020 was the next time we had a new spacecraft that carried humans to space. There is a Netflix documentary on this, Return to Space. So SpaceX had been flying to space for a while with a cargo spacecraft. They made a crew version of the Dragon, the Crew Dragon. And the first launch of it was, I believe, May in 2020. It was called Demo 2. And since then, it's flown 7 times. In fact, one of the flights literally just landed a few hours ago. 2 of them have been with space tourists, 5 of them have been carrying NASA astronauts or astronauts for other countries. But this has become sort of the backbone of US flight capability right now. And I think that makes it a Drake. It's cheap, it's relatively effective, it does everything. It's not quite as capable as the space shuttle, but it'll do the job. And honestly, like whenever you propose any application in space, somebody's like, well, we can use the Dragon, we can use SpaceX for that, right? And yeah, you can't run an op in Eve without someone saying, oh, I'm just going to bring my Drake, right? I mean, we know, we've been there, right? No, fleet doctrine doesn't, no. Yeah, so just an aside, by the way, the Dragon is launched on a rocket called the Falcon 9. Yes, we have, the Falcon is, of course, a spaceship in EVE Online. And I love this photo. I love the thing about the Dragon. Well, the thing about the Falcon is that it doesn't just go up on rockets. It comes back down on rockets. If you've seen a rocket landing, it is a Falcon 9. And this picture on the right, you can see somebody standing next to that rocket. That is a 20-story office building that lands after falling back from space. We are living in the future. By the way, I don't know, does anyone have an idea who would win a Falcon 9 or 9 Falcons? Yeah. 2021, we saw the sequel to Spaceship One, Spaceship Two. This was Richard Branson and Jeff Bezos were racing to see who would get passengers into space first. And Richard Branson sort of beat them on a technicality. This is basically another suborbital joyride for space tourists. And I think this is sort of the equivalent to the Apotheosis, which is another rare ship. Again, taken out by the owner once to check it out and spends the rest of its time in hangars. But it does have cool wings. This is Jeff Bezos' spaceship, right? The New Shepard. It's named, of course, after Alan Shepard, first American in space, who flew in a rocket that was fueled by, well, alcohol. It's a suborbital joyride built by Jeff Bezos. And yeah, it's actually flown William Shatner to space, which is pretty cool, and Wally Funk. And can anyone guess what Eve ship this is? I know a lot of you probably say the Thorax, right? I mean, the Thorax is the obvious one, right? But I thought about it a bit more, and I think it kind of has that look of the Armageddon, but we're not quite there. I think the Balgorn is it, right? I'll tell you why, because it's not just the looks. But if you're in a Balgorn, you're going to get primaries right away. Your flight is going to be very short, but you're going to have a lot of fun. Everyone's going to hate you. Plus, there might be some metaphor about, blood-sucking and capitalism. Okay, we're not quite there because we're about to see some new spaceships flying soon. And again, these are spaceships carrying people. If you have money, you can fly some of these. I don't know if you will, but literally launching in a few weeks, we're going to have the second test flight of Boeing's Starliner. If that works, then it will carry crew later in the year. So this will have a crew of 2 to 5. It's doing the same thing as SpaceX's Dragon, but at about 60% more cost. Yeah, and literally they were rolling it along the road to the integration facility, and a bit fell off. Like today, the first time it launched, it went crazy because its clocks got mismatched. The second time they launched, the valves rusted shut. Yeah, it's Boeing. I don't know, like what? Yeah, I think that's a strategic cruiser, mostly because it costs a lot. And it's built in parts that don't always work together by the sound of things. And then the SLS. Well, actually, technically, it's the Orion, which flies on the SLS. And this was originally developed for a rocket called the Ares back, well, actually, when EVE Online started, the Orion was being developed. So SLS rolled out to the pad to be checked. They wanted to do a full-on dress rehearsal, and things didn't work. So they're now rolling it back to fix a bunch of things. So it's going to fly soon. And if that works, we should see people on it by about 2024. But that will be like 20 years after it was first proposed. So I think that this is like a pirate capital ship because it's rare. Like they're going to fly this maybe once every 2 years. It's incredibly expensive, right? It is billions of dollars, mostly because politicians are getting stuff done in their state. And yeah, all that extra money doesn't buy you much better than what SpaceX is doing. And yeah, if you've ever been in like a cap swarm, you'll notice the guys with the fancy faction pirate caps. They're never the first in. They're always turning up late, just in case things don't quite work. But I did catch this photo yesterday, by the way, of the Leif Erikson statue sort of looking at the moon. SLS and Orion, they are part of NASA's plan to return to the moon, and hopefully it is to stay this time. So I saw this image, and I thought I should probably put this in the presentation. And then I sort of realized that, well, you know, Leif Erikson, you all know he named Greenland, so he would probably call the moon Airland. India have a space program. They don't have astronauts. They have, well, I think they're calling them Vimanauts, but if anyone from India wants to disagree on that, we can tell me. Yeah, I don't have huge details on this, but it's a small 3-crew thing. We're probably going to see a test launch later this year, and crew launch maybe a couple of years from now. I think that is like a Punisher, mostly because it's very similar to the Rifter in design, but it's shinier. Really, that's about it. And since we're in Iceland, we have to talk about Viking-adjacent stuff. And we have Copenhagen Suborbitals, who are a bunch of crowd-funded, awesome people, great videos teaching you rocket science. They are going to fly this thing with a person inside it, parachute back. It's going to be fueled by alcohol, because that is a great rocket fuel for all sorts of reasons. Yeah, they've got a bunch of videos teaching some basic stuff. But I think I've looked at the thing that you're going to fall back to Earth in, and I think that this is like a suicide gank catalyst, right? I mean, it's going to be fun for a few seconds. But yeah, but the real cool future, the shiny future we're all talking about, is SpaceX's shiny sci-fi stainless steel Starship. Yes, this is huge, right? It's 50 meters tall, it's 9 meters in diameter, it's thousands of tons. The test flights of just the upper stage have been spectacular. Look at the size of this thing. It's going to put 100 tons into orbit. It's going to be taller than the Saturn V. It's going to be 5,500 tons. And it's built in a tent in Texas. Like, this gives you an idea of the size of this rocket. This is them mating it together for the first time, and they put it in black and white to try and evoke those images of skyscrapers being constructed. I want to show you like a portion of the test flight, and we do have audio in this apparently. It might be a little longer, so maybe we should turn the sound down a little. This is what it looks like rising. So this is a test flight where they wanted to show that it could descend through the atmosphere. So it's flying on 3 engines. These are called Raptor engines because SpaceX likes to name their engines after birds. These engines produce about 200 tons of thrust each, and as it goes higher, they're cutting out the engines because what they want to do is bring it up to about 10 kilometers high, and once it's there, they're going to have it fall back down and use aerodynamics to glide. And I don't mean glide like the space shuttle. I mean sort of just drop like a belly flop, like a skydiver. Again, this is something the size of a building doing like a free-fall skydive under control. This is one of the most majestic things that I have ever seen. And the amazing thing is that this has been sort of largely done out in the open. There's a bunch of fans down there documenting everything. Like whenever something happens down there, someone has photographs of it. And there's all sorts of secret messages to the fans. So yeah, watch this thing. It is falling down. The idea being, right, this thing wants to be 100% reusable, so it has to return from orbit. And to do that, they need to maximize the drag, and they have to have a heat shield. So this is the attitude that it takes. This was them demonstrating for the first time that this was possible. And it was a perfect descent right up until they had low pressure in their fuel tanks. And when they had low pressure in their fuel tanks, it meant they weren't feeding enough fuel to the engines. The engines started getting too much oxygen, and they started basically burning all the copper off the engines and eating those engines from the inside. That's why the engine flare here turns green. It is, yeah, glorious. But yeah, it didn't quite work on the first attempt. It didn't work on the second attempt or the third attempt. It did eventually work, and now they're trying to build the rest of the rocket. It is an avatar as far as I'm concerned. It is big, it's shiny, it's expensive, and it's a big deal when one of these things drop. The only thing is, I think that they went the opposite of making the front pointy. By the way, I think this is Starship in Amarian gold. I don't know, maybe the color's not quite right. But yeah, what happened to the space planes? We're almost done. We had the space shuttle. Why aren't there any space planes? We do have space planes. We have the Boeing X-37B. It's operated by the US Department of Defense. Nobody flies on this. It spends months or years in orbit, and it returns to the runway unannounced. And that makes it a covert ops living in local, right? What are they doing? Are they going to surprise us with a hot drop? Maybe they're a bomber, right? And yes, foreign militaries do actually say that the US has set this up as a bomber that can fly back, mostly because they want money from their governments. There's also the Dream Chaser, which I'm excited for because it's going to be a cargo ship to the space station that can return space station cargo to any runway in the world. And that means it's not like getting a capsule from the sea, bringing it back, unpacking the experiments. This literally lands and you have door-to-door service for your science experiments. The only thing is, it's not going to carry humans right now. People wanted to carry humans. They wanted to sell NASA on the idea of putting humans on this, but NASA was like, no, we're done with space planes for now. You know, you can carry cargo. And that means that it's a fighter, mostly because people keep on asking to fly the fighters as spacecraft, doesn't happen. So anyway, that is most of my presentation. I think I just want to come back and say, I've been thinking about my sort of role in Eve for a while. I still do log in, but Eve was what, basically brought me to my current status as a content producer. And they call me a content producer. I'm not really much of a content producer. I'm more of a storyteller, right? I tell the stories. And in Eve, developers created Eve, they created the lore, but most of the stories from Eve come from the people. You're the content creators. And I find it heartening that when I tell these stories, people think it's cool, and their first reaction is they want to be part of those stories going forward. And there's very few games out there like that have the capacity to allow players to be part of this creative process. And that's my talk. So I'm Scott Manley. Fly safe. Okay.